Hello, you malty muffin men. I'm Chad Davis. I'm coming to you from the cozy Maryland rental house, the House of Scotch. Here ends the Ralphie Mitchell invitation. Thank you, Ralphie, for all of your inspirational videos and whiskey knowledge. This video is a video response to my son Rhett's Scotch video, which he produced last night on the lovely Bruichladdich Scottish Barley. I hope to do a few things. Honor Rhett's great video that he made, his review of this Scotch. Continue my Scotch education, Rhett's Scotch education, and if you watch this, you'll learn a lot about Scotch and get the Scotch education you didn't know that you needed. I'd like to make a few points in response to the things that Rhett said, and most importantly, I would like to open, taste, and review a brand new bottle of Scotch, which I've never had before. So let's start with the bottle. Bottle comes in the nice can. I think that's it's good to protect it, helps to sell it, and it's got all kinds of information on it. But I'm going to ignore the can because when you get a bottle of Scotch, really all the information that you need should be on the bottle itself. So to begin with, it's a glass bottle. It doesn't look like it because it's got this nice matte finish Bruichladdich teal paint on it. Bruichladdich is a distillery, and we'll talk about them in a minute. Progressive Hebridean Distillers, Bruichladdich. It's kind of a boutique distillery. They reinvent their product line all the time. They have lots and lots of scotches, and to my great dismay, once I had a truly epic scotch, the Bruichladdich 12-year-old second edition. But I think I really bought the very last bottle in the free world. And I drank it and shared it and passed it around, and it was gone, and I have not been able to find another ever since. And the reason is that Bruichladdich doesn't keep a standard Scotch line for a very long time. For instance, like Macallan 12. You'll be able to find Macallan 12 for a long time. I've heard that it's to be replaced with some non-age statement Scotches, but yet Macallan 12 persists. And it's been around as long as I've been drinking Scotch, probably longer, and I'm hoping that it will be here long after I have stopped. And I don't plan to stop. Bruichladdich, however, they come up with new expressions all of the time. There are more than I can count, and this is one I have not had. It is the Scottish Barley, the classic Laddie. Now, on the label here, it says Scottish Barley, and that means that all of the barley used in the production of this Scotch was grown on the island of Scotland, or islands of Scotland. Previously, a couple years ago, I had another Bruichladdich expression, and it was Islay barley. That means on the Isle of Islay, where this was produced. In that particular expression, all of the barley used to distill and make the Scotch had been grown on the island of Islay. It didn't cost any more. It did cost me a pretty penny to get it to the United States from Scotland, but it was, well, maybe I'll buy it locally next time. This tells us that it's unpeated, and in Islay, as Rhett correctly annotated yesterday, in Islay, most of the Scotches are known for their peatiness. Peat is earth and partially decomposed vegetable matter, roots and leaves and stems, vegetable matter that is rotting in the ground, and it smells bad, but it's flammable, and it's very useful for making Scotch. And on the Isle of Islay, it's so prevalent that it flavors the water, and I'm interested to see just how they can get a Scotch to not taste peaty if they make it on the Isle of Islay. They don't use the peating process, whereby when they dry the malted barley, they use peat in the fire, and the smoke, the hot peat smoke, circulates in the malting room to dry out the barley, and it imparts a lot of phenols and a lot of flavor. Some people like the flavor, and some people don't. It took me a while to get accustomed to really peaty Scotches, but one of my very favorites, perhaps my very favorite, as Rhett identified his favorite, is the Ardbeg Uigeadail. Rhett, it's not Aberlour, it's Ardbeg Uigeadail, and it's wonderful, and it's very peaty, and it does taste like Kansas City barbecue. If you're in Kansas City and you disagree, buy me a glass of Scotch and we'll talk about it. Okay, what else does the label tell us? It tells us that it is distilled, matured, and bottled, unchill filtered, and color-free at Bruichladdich Distillery, Isle of Islay, Scotland. So the whole process for it to be called Scotch has to take place on the island of Scotland. Now, the rules have changed in years recently, or so Ralphie Mitchell tells me, so that's the case. It must even be bottled in Scotland, and all of that happened there. It all happened in one place. They distilled it, they aged it, matured it, they bottled it, and made it ready for sale at that distillery. By the way, when it says color-free, what does it say? Coloring-free. This is not important to me. Some distillers and Scotch purveyors will color their Scotch with caramel coloring, and I don't know with what else, but they try to get their light-colored Scotches to look brown. Now, some of my very favorite Scotches are very light. For instance, Bunnahabhain, the Glenlivet and the Dura, very light color because they've been distilled in bourbon. I'm sorry, they've been aged in bourbon casks. And some of my very favorite Scotches are dark and rich because they've been aged usually for a long time in a sherry cask, and they've taken on that color and flavor profile. But I don't care if there is coloring or not. Some folks are very, very motivated to make a big deal about coloring in Scotch, but I don't taste any aftertaste that they talk about, and I don't have any problem with it. I don't care what color my Scotch is, but Bruichladdich, they're doing their marketing another way. They've painted the bottle blue, and they don't want me to see what color the Scotch is until I buy it. That might be smart. Scotches usually come in a clear bottle or a green glass bottle or a dark, smoky black bottle, like a bottle. And it's a lovely Scotch. It's a blended Scotch. You should try it. But Bruichladdich, their marketing machine is huge and awesome, and Jim McEwen does a great job selling Scotch. And they have made it impossible for me to see what color the Scotch is. They've also helped to delay the onset of depression that inevitably takes place when I look at the bottle and I see that there is barely any left of that fine Scotch. I'll have to be disappointed when I pick up the nearly empty bottle rather than when I look at it. So thank you, Jim McEwen, for the blue paint, and it may make my enjoyment last a little longer. This is the classic Lottie, and perhaps they'll keep it around. Perhaps classic means they're going to keep producing it, putting on the shelf, because I can't get a hold of that 12-year-old second edition ever again. So speaking of 12-year-old, that's something it doesn't say on the label. Nowhere here does it say anything about its age, and that's called a non-age statement whiskey. And what that means is the whiskeys can be any age. Now, in order for it to be called Scotch, all of the liquid in the glass has to be at least 3 years old. It has to have been aged at least 3 years after it came out of the still before they can call it Scotch. It's new make spirit. It might be whiskey, but it cannot be Scotch whiskey until it's 3 years old. I don't remember if I mentioned to you what a single malt is, but a single malt is when all of the whiskey is from the same distillery, and it may be from different casks and of different ages, but for it to be single malt, it all has to be from one distillery. So you might read that, single distillery, malt, Scotch whiskey. Malt means malted barley, single means single distillery, and Scotch whiskey means it's produced in Scotland and it's at least 3 years old. Single malt whiskey is only malt. It won't have any other, only malted barley. It won't have any other grains, no corn, no rye, no wheat. That's the American method. It's the Irish method too. Grain whiskey, we call that. Only malted barley in single malt Scotches. So if it did have an age statement, if it were, say, Bruichladdich 12-year-old second edition, then all of the Scotch in the bottle must be at least 12 years old. Nothing to say it can't be 15 or 20 years old, but all of the barrels that were used and vatted and mixed and the flavor profile played with to create that expression must be at least the age that's listed on the bottle. So I think that I've covered everything on the bottle that we're going to talk about. We'll read this. It's our mission to pursue the ultimate pedigree, provenance, and traceability of our raw materials, chief of which is our barley, and to push the boundaries of the concept of terroir in artisanal single malt whiskey. Very wordy, very sexy, and you know what? It's worth it. They live up to all of the hype. I've had Bruichladdich whiskeys a few times. This will be my third bottle that I've purchased myself, and I truly love Bruichladdich whiskey. So I think it's about time that we open the bottle and get started. Well, it doesn't want to play nice. There we are. You can run, but you cannot hide. Now, last night, my son put his nose in the bottle. I'm not going to do that. Somebody else may want to drink from the bottle one day. But it will smell the cork. And my cork doesn't smell particularly good. Okay, I'm not going to pay too much mind to that. This is Glencairn glass, and Rhett lamented his lack of Glencairn glasses. Not to worry, son. Your birthday will come, and so will the Glencairn glass. The first thing I want to do when I look at a whiskey is I want to look at its color profile. And you know, I was talking about it being unchill filtered, and chill filtering removes stuff, esters, cloudiness. I don't see any cloudiness, but I see some particulate matter floating in my scotch, which is called, in the American provenance, floaties. There are floaties in my glass, but I'm okay with that because I know that they are part of the natural scotch produced at Bruichladdich, their artisanal expression of Scotch whiskey, and it hasn't been overly filtered. It hasn't been brought down to 0 degrees and pressed through a fine paper filter to remove all of the floaties. But that's why they paint the bottle blue. They don't want you to look at the whiskey, they want you to drink the whiskey. And so I'm looking at it, and I see the floating particulates, and I could count them, 8 or 10 of them in there, little things floating around, but I'm okay with that. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to give it a little twirl. Now, it's not so that you can smell it better. You can smell it just fine if you have a Glencairn glass. But it's so that you can observe the viscosity of the whiskey. And I'm waiting for some legs to form, and they're not forming very well. And that tells me that this is thin whiskey. It's not thick. The viscosity compared to other scotches, it should be thin and feel thin in the mouth because it's young. It's not old Scotch, and there's not much old Scotch in it, or the viscosity would be a little better. Okay, now I can see some legs, and they're thin, and they took quite a while to appear. So I'm not sure what that indicates, but I'm thinking this is young Scotch. I'll get to the nose in a minute. Looking at this, I'd call it gold. It's not amber. If amber's the standard, it's amber -2. It's light-colored whiskey. That doesn't bother me because I know that color is not really an indicator. It probably means that it was aged in bourbon casks, and we'll give it a taste and find out in a second. So the next thing I want to do is I want to nose this whiskey, and that's why this Glencairn glass has a little chimney on it, is so that it's easier to get a whiff of everything that's in that glass. Okay. Musk and fruit, specifically apricot. You know, this is really subjective. Is Rhett right when he says cherries and walnuts? Well, yes, he is, because it's subjective. There's no objectivity to what things smell like. To him, it smells like cherries and walnuts. To me, it smells like a vegetable drawer that needs to be cleaned out. To me, it smells like old fruit that's starting to lose its color and shape on the kitchen counter. An orange that's sat out too long. You think, oh, that doesn't smell good. Yes, it does. But it's reminiscent of that musky smell that citrus fruit puts out when it's been sitting in the house a little while too long. It hasn't started growing any fuzz on it yet, but breathing deeper, there's butter. I'm looking for the cinnamon that Rhett was talking about, and the cinnamon. I don't get it. I don't see it there. I don't taste it there. The peppermint he was talking about. But it's subjective. What my nose tells me is there, and what his nose tells him is there, are two different things. So I'm going to taste it. Oh my. that is strong whiskey. 100 proof, 50% alcohol by volume, and it may take me a sip or two to get past that to the flavor profile. What I do taste is funk. What I do taste is that flavor that the nose betrays, is fruit that's not quite good anymore. Oh, it's lovely though. You really have to be a Scotch guy, and you have to have had your share of different Scotches to appreciate what gold is in this glass. Pardon the double entendre. It's really very good. And now there is a Granny Smith apple profile. There is the taste of leather. And I don't taste, well, I taste a little walnut, like he was saying, a little nutty bit there in the middle of the palate, not when it first goes in your mouth and not quite in the finish. The palate's not as intricate as I had hoped, but I really put a high standard on Bruichladdich and on unchill filtered whiskey. So it's very good. It's very good. So the finish is not long. I really don't think this whiskey is very old. It's a non-age statement whiskey, so let's guess that it's 4 years old, it's 5 years old. I'm drinking it out of a glass that has a Kilchoman Distillery logo on it because I like Islay whiskey. I tried some Kilchoman whiskey that was very young. I knew it was young because when I bought it, the Kilchoman Distillery was young and was barely old enough to be producing Scotch. And I think I had a 4 or maybe 5-year-old expression of the Kilchoman Makir Bay. In fact, I still have it. I have it here. And it has a very peaty profile. Lest I forget what peat smells like. It smells like that. And this is musty. And this is dank. And it is something that probably would be at home in the floorboard of a dinghy off the coast of the Hebridean Islands in a rainstorm. It's got a ocean taste to it, a musky, dark, funky undertone. But that undertone is not distinctively peat. I cannot name. Peat has probably influenced the way that this tastes, but I don't believe the undertone is directly attributable to a phenol content or exposure of the elements of the water and the barley to peat on the Isle of Islay. Maybe so. It has a little Talisker feel to it. It definitely tastes briny. That's the word, briny. Like it's got a wet, salty component to it. It doesn't register on the tongue like salt, but it's got a briny taste. The finish is short. It's hot. It's a 50% alcohol by volume. After the second sip, it's no problem. The first sip was a little bit of a shock, but I should have known. Unlike Ralphie Mitchell, I don't taste and write my tasting profile notes before I write the review. It's a brand new bottle of Scotch. It's not like I do a lot of reviews anyway. But today, I chose to do just like Rhett and pop the cork. And he said christen it, but I'm going to debut the Bruichladdich Scottish Barley for me and for you. And give it a whirl, as they say, and give it a review. So I really like it, but I don't know that I'll buy it again. It's not a top-tier Scotch for me. I've had really some fine Scotches in my day, and I like it. I will turn it down. It's a wonderful gift. If you would like to mail it to me, feel free. As long as that's legal in your state, I'll be just fine opening the package. And I think it's time to talk about water and Scotch. So there's a couple reasons why you would want to put water in your Scotch. One reason is a cask strength expression like the Nadura or the Macallan cask strength. It can be very, very high alcohol by volume. pretty sure that I've got a bottle of Glenlivet Nadura 16-year-old in there that is something like 58% alcohol by volume, or what would that be? 116 proof. If you have a cut in your mouth, you will know it. And it's a little daunting, and it's hard for most people to appreciate or enjoy a scotch that's that strong. So you might put a little water in it to bring it down to a level that you're more accustomed to. If you're accustomed to, say, 43%, a little water in this scotch will help. But there's another way, another reason why scotch aficionados like to put water in their scotch. Because, especially with unchilled filter scotches, there is a chemical reaction that allows the scotch to open up. You know, a little time in the glass helps scotch open up, but water really opens the scotch up and allows a lot of flavors that you won't taste just drinking it neat. I love to drink my scotch neat. I usually don't want to be bothered with water, and I don't like to ruin scotch with ice. So I usually drink my scotch neat. But I think when I try a new expression, I should at least put a little water in it. And I told you, I promised you, that we would take a look at what's called the Scottish mist. When that chemical reaction takes place, the scotch clouds up. And I got a little water over here. So looking at the scotch right now, it's very clear. Maybe you can see some floaties in there. I doubt that my camera is going to pick that up, but I can see the floaties, and I'm okay with that. You know, if a fly lands in my scotch, I'll shoo him away because I don't like the taste of flies, but I know he won't drink much. Okay, so I'm going to add a little water, and I mean just a little water. A few drops ought to do it. Now you can see some swirling lines. Look at that floaty in there. It's gigantic. You can see some swirling lines and a little squiggliness to it. Didn't really cloud up much, but I could see a little reaction. I don't want to put any more water in it than that. I don't know. It's not really showing it. But man, I can see the floaties in there now. I wonder what those things are. It's okay. My liver will process them. Now it's got a fresher smell than that musty sock drawer, dingy in the briny bay smell. I would say maybe we even washed away that mustiness with just a bit of water. There's a much more pronounced fruit profile. It's even sweet in the finish now. That little bit of water really changed. Whoa! Okay. There's a little bit of an aftertaste, a little bit of a bitterness in the finish there once it's been watered. Now, Rhett mentioned the bitterness in the finish, which I didn't get that neat. But maybe I wasn't taking a big enough sip. Now it's a truly, truly enjoyable scotch. I don't think we diminished the alcohol content very much, but that little bit of water caused a chemical reaction that made it blossom, made it open up, and it's got a really nice flavor profile now. It's like orange marmalade. It's like orange marmalade plugged in to an electrical outlet. It's like, yeah, orange marmalade. It's tempting to describe the alcohol burn as cinnamon, but it doesn't have a cinnamon flavor. It's just got the burn of alcohol in the finish. But it's a very acceptable, ordinary burn. If you drink whiskey, then you're used to this. If you drink cheap whiskey, you get way more burn and harshness than this will ever convey. To use the word smooth in a Scotch review just says you probably don't really know about Scotch, because smoothness is not necessarily a desired quality. Desired quality in Irish whiskey, because they triple distill it and distill all of the flavor right out of it by doing all of that distillation. Scotch is more raw. Scotch is more earthy. Scotch is more of a representation of the raw ingredients, the water and the barley and the yeast that is chosen to make the Scotch. And it's a representation of the wood and whatever was in the wood before the wood became a Scotch barrel, when it was a bourbon barrel, when it was a wine cask, when it was a sherry cask. The Scotch is a much more true representation of those natural ingredients. I like it, and I probably will buy it again now that I've tasted it with a bit of water. Be careful if you water a Scotch. Make sure that it's at least 43% alcohol by volume, or you'll probably drown it. In other words, you water it down until it doesn't taste like liquor at all. And if you're into that, then don't buy expensive Scotch. If you need a lot of water, or you want soda or a mixer in your Scotch, buy something inexpensive like bourbon or Irish whiskey, because I think Rhett said he paid $54 for his bottle. Scotch in Maryland is far more expensive than it is in Texas. That's a tax structure. I suppose that's part of living in this state. I think this is about $65. I don't really recall. But if you're going to drop $50 plus on a bottle of Scotch, please, please, please don't ruin it with water or with ginger ale or anything like that. So now we come to the end of our review, and I'm going to give the Scotch rating. I typically rate my favorite Scotches around 93 or 94 points, in keeping with the wine industry and the Scotch industry. And Scotches that I have no respect for, I rate in the 70s. But I'm going to give this Scotch, in Ralphie Mitchell fashion, I don't know if you can see that. How about I write it bigger? An 88. Red, thank you very much. I truly enjoyed your Scotch review last night, and that is all.